All right, what is going on, everyone? Welcome back. Hope everyone is doing very well. In today's video, I want to go over what I call the net worth system. Now, today's going to be a fun video. We're going to get a little bit more operationally in the weeds today. And I want to frame this video from the jump as, we're putting on our systems and, operationally thinking hats today. We're going to come from it as like almost like a financial engineer perspective. And I guess the idea behind this being, I put such a big emphasis on having a strong foundation and infrastructure in place first, because it gives you the confidence and the clarity that you need as you are building and evolving and optimizing over time. This having this in place, basically keeps you from being, vulnerable in a sense, like not being, if you at some point are, you experience a black swan sort of catastrophe event that, is unforeseen that you're not necessarily prepared for, having a strong infrastructure and having layers of protection in place, it keeps you in the game essentially when something like that happens. So maybe this isn't the most, fun kind of like sexy things to talk about. I think it's fun to talk about, organizations and flow charts and stuff like that. It just brings me peace. What can I say? It makes me happy. So the idea behind this, again, being, this is a video that was inspired by one of my very first mentors who put this blueprint in place for me for the first time. And it's something that I've internalized, and also from a guy named Taylor Welch. If you guys are not familiar with him, highly suggest checking him out. He's a really, really badass marketer and shares a lot of really good personal finance content as well. And so, it originally came from my mentor, and then, learning from Taylor and actually putting this into practice, the last couple of years, it's helped me to refine this down a little bit more. And again, I guess for me, like my natural curiosity, my interest has always been what's happening sort of behind the scenes, right? Like what's the system, the blueprint that people are following that leads to that sort of desired outcome or success. And so again, I say this isn't like necessarily the fun stuff to talk about, because when people think of like wealth or, trying to build wealth, like I think the idea comes to like what we externally can grasp or really what we see, right? So it's like the nice houses, the nice cars, a nice watch. I think my watch is nice, but like, yeah, I want to own a nicer watch. But I know that's, again, almost thinking of like, again, like in a systems way, there's an order of operations to follow, right? So I guess for me, like, it's sort of non-negotiable. Like first things first, that foundation needs to be in place. And that foundation essentially being invisible to most people. Think of it of like the, scaffolding or infrastructure of like of a building, or, a good way that Taylor Welch actually sort of framed this for me. The way that I understood it was like, think about it as like roots of a tree, right? Like those, we're digging deep roots. When that tree is growing and growing, and let's say that tree gets struck by lightning, or, the wind starts blowing real hard. Like I don't want that tree to topple over. I want that tree to stand firm, stand strong, and I don't want to get wiped out of the game essentially. So again, the idea behind this is like, this is totally internal. But I am a big believer that the external reality that we are experiencing on a daily basis is really a big projection of what is happening internally. So if you're internally strong and in place, and you have that foundation, you have that structure, then you can, have that sort of that feeling of harmony that I think, a lot of us are after when we think of like financial independence. So let's just jump in. I wanted to find sort of the, some of the variables that sort of form the overarching, kind of system that we put in place. Actually, real quick, I just wanted to find my idea of what I think of when I think of the term systems of wealth, and really what I have internalized when I've thought about, sort of building like that, where that name came from. So systems being a framework, procedure, sort of like methodology to follow for how things work, and those things seemingly being disconnected, but how each of those things work separately to form kind of the overarching sort of like interconnected network in a whole, right? And then wealth being the physical, material, representation or almost realization of that inner abundance, right? Like that inner, you get there first internally, and then your external environment essentially catches up to it. So this is the system that, I have put in place, or that I think about from a sense. So let's just define some of these variables a little bit first. Obviously, I really like this quote: true defensible net worth requires layers of protection. Again, the idea of having layers of protection so that, you are not exposing yourself to vulnerabilities, essentially. Like I don't want to get wiped out of the game. I want to be able to, stay in the game as much as possible. Like you can improve your upside by, covering your downside, essentially. Like growth and scaling, is something that is talked about in the market, and it's kind of sexy, and that's the fun kind of fast stuff that grows. But I just don't think you can sustain that or do that, or have longevity to do that over the long term, consistently, if you don't have that foundation and that structure in place. It's like, the way that I would almost frame it is like, you can't walk into the gym and throw, 3 plates on the bar and, and bench press 315 without having a good form for benching a bar, benching 135, 225, and then getting up to 315. Like, you just can't do it. You're going to snap your shit. You're just going to break yourself. So like, you got to have that foundation, that structure, that, that strength internally first. You have that first, and then you can go and actually achieve that desired outcome. So again, let's go back to this a little bit more. So, I really, really like the way, again, I got these terms, or, kind of like the way that we define the variables from Taylor. But you can think about this as like your income streams, right? So your pumps are your streams of income. Again, essentially you want as many as you can. So the idea of a pump, it is bringing and attracting that currency into your life. So a pump should do essentially 3 things. Think of it as like a business sense, right? So like, or a business, or, your skills or your job, or, your occupation, whatever that might be. It is, creating value in the marketplace. It is converting that value to revenue, and it is bringing that revenue obviously into your bank account. And then it is, creating, protecting, and guarding your surplus. I have found that it is a lot easier to make investment decisions consistently, and not necessarily, not that I am, totally risky or not afraid to lose, but having consistent cash flow coming in on a monthly basis and knowing that I'm going to continue to kind of top off my reserves or create a surplus gives you a lot of confidence in the ability to continue to make those decisions on a regular basis. So again, pumps just being your streams of income. So you're attracting your income, into your bank account. Now your buckets, think of this as like your asset classes. So a bucket should do 3 things. This is storing your capital. It is paying you a yield, so paying you interest, and essentially getting more valuable time. That is a really good bucket. Now, not, all your buckets, might have, might play a different role specifically for you and kind of in your own system that you were able to build. But think about it from a perspective of like real estate, stocks, crypto, other businesses that you might be buying. So think about it like, again, like the real estate bucket, certainly hopefully is going to store your capital. If it's, a good purchase, it's going to pay you, it's going to pay you cash flow, and, the equity appreciation over time, it's going to be more valuable. Right. But, crypto, I would consider to be a bucket. It's one of my asset classes, but, in that approach, I'm placing more of like an asymmetric bet, right? So like asymmetric meaning like this is a small amount of money, it's not a whole lot of, there's not a lot of downside, there's not a lot of risk, but there's a massive potential for big upside. And that's not necessarily, maybe going to pay me a yield on a monthly basis, or pay me cash flow, but I'm going to, put that, I'm going to place that bet now, and in, let's say if my, time horizon is long enough, 5-10 years, there might be a really big, outsized, potential upside or return that I'm going to get on that. So again, pumps being your income, buckets being your asset classes, and moats being essentially think of it as like your insurance policies in a sense. So like this is protecting this is your liquidity or cash equivalent. So, think about it as like, the examples being, life insurance policies, actual cash on hand, different precious metals, even like I would consider like maybe an I bond or something like that. Like again, but like this is, trying to protect your liquidity. This is your underlying protection, right? So like if a bucket, one of your assets gets, is down or upside down, or, a real world example for me would be, I had, a decent amount of money in the Terra Luna, ecosystem essentially. And this is a crypto protocol that I was involved in. And when that sort of black swan event happened, I lost a good chunk of money, seemingly like in 48 hours, essentially. But it didn't wipe me out of the game because I wasn't overexposed in just that one asset class, right? Like I had my underlying insurance sort of in place, and again, like the idea of how this, how these work together, is again, pumps attracting cash into the system. Every month I am moving currency out of my fiat into my buckets. And underneath that, there are layers of moats to defensify and really protect the whole system. That's really the idea. So again, income is, attracted in, and I am intentionally, I have, an idea of what I'm going to be doing with that surplus of cash, going into my assets on a monthly basis. And then the moats, the insurance policies, again, the idea behind that is like, I'm not expecting a crazy return from those. Those are protecting, my liquidity as I am taking chips off the table. I want to store those in vehicles that are going to protect that and defensify the whole system, right? Like really keep me in the game over the long term. So that's really the idea. Now I've personally, again, I have overcomplicated it probably, but I have taken this to another level where, I think about this from like the wealth machine perspective, right? So like, again, the pumps being that my different income streams are coming into if you guys have watched a previous video, we talked about the different accounts on finance. So pumps being, again, the big cash input that's coming into my operational bank account. Immediately off the top, I'm thinking about taking 30%, for taxes and just putting that into, a separate account. And that's just earmarked. It's there. I'm not doing anything with it. It's just, it's done. So 30% is going into that, 40% being for, being able to fund my lifestyle. So my personal and business expenses, and then the other 30% going and funding sort of like sort of like the net worth system, the pumps, or I'm sorry, the buckets and the moats, that's the surplus that's created, right? So again, the idea being, I'm putting the constraints in place, and as money is attracted into the system, I have, the constraints in place. I have I'm already being very intentional and relying on my systems that are defined and in place first, rather than my willpower, essentially, for, okay, this money's coming in, like, if I'm relying on my willpower, I might break that down. But if I have a system in place and it's just, I don't even have to think about it, it's automated, and I'm relying on that, that's where, you really can just, again, like, this stuff is happening behind the scenes. I'm not even thinking about it. And it's giving me, strong foundation. It's giving me peace. It's giving me the harmony that I need to, again, keep me in place, keep me in the game over the long term. And again, why this is important is, again, this is the structure that we are deploying to automate everything in our personal finances. So again, the other way to think about it is like pipes in a drain structure. So like that water is coming in, let's say like through a kitchen sink, and behind the scenes, completely invisible to all of us, is a structure of pipes, right? That is leading that water to, the defined, essential places that are already, in place. So again, I think what's cool about this is like, you build it once, you put it in place once, and essentially you're done. Like the buckets and the moats, like that can, definitely continue to evolve, and you can improve on that over time. But I think defining this in place first and having that, and building it, really gives you like, okay, what else, once again, for me, I guess, I've had this in place now, I would say, I feel confident having it in place now for probably the last, I would say, year, essentially. Like I have, what these buckets and assets specifically for me are very defined. And again, that makes, that is defined by what my long-term goals are, what my risk appetite is, where I'm at currently in my life, in my own lifestyle, and what my goals are. It's different for everybody. But I think the idea behind this is like the system that we are born and kind of, just sort of placed into is broken, or at least it is rigged in a way for us not to win. And I think putting a system like this in place and defining it and building it for yourself, again, you start with the end in mind, you define your desired outcome, and then you put your system in place to get you to that over the long term. And again, this is the blueprint. This is completely invisible to everybody around us. Maybe this isn't like necessarily, externally what people think of when when they view wealth. But again, I think wealth being the inner abundance that we get to experience, and that comes from having frameworks, having sort of like decision frames in place first, so that when something like this comes up, you can fall back on your constraint, you can lean on your system to keep you strong, keep you moving forward. And again, you are completely like removing as much as possible your downside and your exposure to risk. So again, the idea, once this is in place, once this is built, is then you can turn your attention to your pumps of just filling the system with as much cash as possible. And again, I think the idea behind it is like, there's sort of two schools of thought. It's like, why would I spend and allocate my resource of time and my focus on, putting kind of like, thinking about investing in these different buckets if I am not, if I don't have a big, sort of surplus of income? And I do believe in that. I think there's an order of operations, and there's a sequence to follow. And we've talked about that in past videos. But once you are sort of creating that surplus, like I do want to get a good return on my capital. And again, not even that in a sense, like I think it even goes a layer deeper of just being like, I want to be intentional with my money, and I want to do what's best for my money. So, I still have like the relative good amount of cash on hand to be able to continue to invest in my business or my pumps that are continuing to bringing cash into the system. Like you just can't ignore that. But I do want to think about this from a long-term time horizon perspective of like, if I can just get some experience and learn what the structure and put this in place now, again, it gives me the confidence that I need as I am approaching my pumps and I'm bringing more cash into the system. I already have a defined outcome in place. I know the destinations of where this needs to go to, again, defensify and protect me from the whole system. And I think, this is just a little bit of a different perspective of like, when people think of net worth, they think about like scaling and growing and having like, like a crazy amount of wealth, like, and scaling that up fast. Like it can happen fast, but I think there's a big difference between making money and like keeping money, or managing your money, earning your money as it coming in. But I think managing your money and knowing what to do with that money is a skill. And I think it's a whole nother skill than like growing a business and being, good at attracting, that type of currency into your system. I think it is two different skills. I think I went super deep the last couple of years on like sort of everything below pumps. So like putting like the operational account in place, experiencing some hiccups when it comes to taxes and learning from those mistakes, and really like building my credit and having really good solid credit so that like all my expenses are going on that. And then just having I had a natural curiosity around like, how do people, leverage real estate and build, wealth in the real estate market? What's the best approach for me when it comes to like investing in the stock market? What's this thing that's happening in the crypto market, brand new asset class? What's that all about? And then, how does, I've heard just like, okay, tell me about gold and silver. Tell me about life insurance. Like I just had the natural curiosity, and, from, whether, whether it was valuable or not, just couldn't help but, exposing myself to it and just pulling the thread and getting into it. And that led to building sort of a system and kind of a framework and a foundation like this to follow. And now again, like being where I'm at right now, this sort of is in place, and it gives me the freedom that I need to just go and focus on how can I make as much money as possible. Again, not make, but how can I earn and increase my income as much as possible? And like, and again, thinking about it from like a position of leverage, knowing that as that currency is coming in, I can, I have the constraints in place. So I know I am, allocating it correctly. But again, I think having like this underarching or underlying foundation in place for me, again, this is, I can only speak for me and what has worked and served me very well. But, I guess, again, for me, having that foundation in place first, as I am continuing to grow and look for, more advantageous positions when it comes to, either my consulting business or building a new business or just growing and scaling now, as again, like you can think about it from a business perspective as well. Like I really believe in, I think it was Peter Drucker said, like, be the CEO of your life, essentially. So this is like the internal business that I'm building, right? And so now, like the engine that powers the machine is you become the biggest asset that powers all this forward. Like this machine stops if the cash flow stops. Like if that attracting that currency into the system, that becomes essentially you, and you need to put, that surplus of capital also into you to, to continue to improve you as the asset, build your skills, grow your network, continue to just, be more valuable for the marketplace. That's going to lead to more income coming in, and having the foundation in place, you can allocate it then correctly. So that's pretty much it for today. Hopefully this is valuable for some people. Hopefully, again, you can study this a little bit, sort of internalize this a little bit more, and think about, how kind of where you're at in this, order of operations or this sequencer system, and, defining this and building it kind of in place for yourself. And again, the idea behind like the system that we are sort of like born and kind of pushed into, in my opinion, I just think is broken, or again, is just not designed, in a way for us to win. Like it's to keep us sort of stuck in the system. And I want to break it and get out of it and define my own and live in my own system or reality, or whatever you want to call it. So again, hopefully this is valuable. Again, I appreciate your time, effort, energy, and attention watching these videos. If you like this video, please leave a comment. Let me know if you notice any issues, you want to have a deeper discussion about it. Totally open to that as well. Don't forget to like this video, share it with somebody that you think might be, might have some value from this content as well. To all my builders out there, I salute you. Again, thank you all for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.